We've reached that hat knitting time of year. We need them for gifts, we need them for our family, and we may need them for charity knitting. Happily, hats can easily be knitted out of odds and ends because even for adults, they're not that big a project. And while I am going to tell you the exact pattern I used and share that with you in this video, I encourage you to think more along the lines of creative techniques to blend the odds and ends. Even though at first glance this pile of yarn doesn't look like a particularly harmonious thing. I'll be working on a bulky machine for this one, and these are mostly number 4, otherwise known as worsted weight yarns. But this one is bulky, and this one is not only bulky, but has not proven to knit as well as I hoped it would on a knitting machine. So I'm going to use the little bit of off-white bulky as part of the hem in a very unorthodox way, and use the Scrub It yarn to add some textural interest with manual weaving. I'll start knitting on every other needle, and I'm e-wrapping every other needle, and 40 needles are forward. For this first part with the bulky yarn, I want the stitch size as tight as I can manage. That turned out to be between stitch sizes 4 and 5 on my SK150. Using that yarn, I knitted 6 rows on every other needle, and as the bulky was running out, tied on the next piece of yarn, this time the true white. All of these color changes are near the hem. Therefore, I can tie true knots of a kind I know never gives it up and just pull the tails into the hem. I do that when I can for simplicity and sturdiness, because this will be a charity hat, and very likely the person who's going to get it isn't going to have a lot of resources for fancy care. After the every other needle rows, knit 18 on every needle. Just bring the needles into work. Now we'll remove the comb and hang the hem. Using every other needle for the first part of the hem reduces the bulk of the hem. This is quite a common technique, and normally we try to hide it inside the hem. This time I'm going to reverse matters and make it a design feature. The every other needle section will be a little window through which we can view the striping on some of the hem fabric. The cast on was in cream colored yarn, and it's being hung in a blue area, so it makes an interesting little design just from hanging it. Once the hem is hung, knit 12 more plain rows, and then we'll move on to the manual weaving technique. Manual weaving is something good to know because just about every machine permits the use of it. This machine has no patterning abilities whatsoever, but manual weaving works beautifully. While knitting the 12 plain rows, I ran out of blue yarn, and I was very close to the end of the blue yarn, so I just dropped the leftover yarn tail at the left and changed colors without making a knot. This is Mary Maxim's Scrub It yarn. It's one of those yarns that is made to give texture to dishcloths, and it does that very well. I have a little bit left over from a larger project, and it's not enough for a dishcloth, but it should give some nice texture and interest to this hat. In place of something like this, you can use all sorts of things. Pieces of narrow ribbon work well, thicker yarns work well, bumpy yarns work, leftover trims from sewing for embellishing clothing, gold cord I've used at times. You can do a lot with manual weaving. To set up for a weaving row, bring all the needles all the way forward. Now manually bring the yarn over some needles and under others. I'm going over 1 and under 2, but you can make any sort of pattern. You may repeat the identical thing every row or change it between rows. I'm going to use the under 2 over 1 pattern throughout, but I will be starting over a different needle each time. Weaving with this particular yarn, I find it helps to keep the fingers on the hand that's doing the weaving quite close to the needles. The tape portion of this yarn is rather loosely woven, so it's easy to accidentally puncture it with the needle, which we don't want in this instance. And the fringe could also get caught, so keeping your fingertips close is a help. So keep up the pattern over 1, under 2, all the way across, or whatever pattern you like. Make sure the carriage is set to knit back from hold, and do that. And when you do, the weaving yarn will be caught in the stitches, but it's not actually knitted, so the fact that it would have been difficult to knit doesn't matter. Now, I'm knitted 3 rows after working a weaving row. Then the carriage ended up on the side where the yarn tail is for the weaving yarn. And now I can weave back going the opposite direction. You can weave more frequently than that. You can even do it every row. But doing it every row really stretches the fabric out and makes it a little bit stiff. So I didn't think it was very appropriate to the hat fabric. Same pattern, but going over a different needle than last time. Weave all the way across, leave the yarn dangling, knit 3 rows. Needles all the way forward, weave over 1, under 2, all the way across, starting with a different needle going over 1, knit 3 rows. And here you can see the look of the weaving developing nicely. Let's do 1 more weaving row. That'll be the 4th time we've woven. Bring the needles forward, work the weaving yarn under 2 and over 1, and knit across. So we've been weaving for 10 rows in all. Hat length is a somewhat subjective thing, but I'm just going to make this one a classic beanie shape. So I knitted 18 more plain rows. Now a little bit of very easy crown shaping. Transfer every 4th stitch to the next needle over. Knit 2 rows, and then there will be groups of 3 stitches all the way across. You won't have a perfect grouping of 3 at one edge. Don't worry about it. Just fudge and do whatever works best. In other words, if there are 2 stitches sitting there, don't move anything, or move one of them to the nearest stitch and let that be a part of a simple decrease. It's not going to be visible exactly what you do and whether the groups of 3 were perfect. What we're doing is simply reducing the number of stitches that get gathered in on a basic gathered crown. And it does look more sophisticated and significantly reduces the bulk at the gathered spot. After all the transfers, knit 1 row. Now turn up the stitch dial to the largest possible stitch size and knit 1 row. Leave a yarn tail that is longer than the width of the knitting as it is on the machine. Thread a yarn needle into the tail and begin picking up stitches onto the yarn needle. As I work, I'm going to show you several different ways that I do it. It can be 1 stitch at a time, a few stitches at a time. You can leave them on the machine for a little bit and then pull a bunch off of the needles all at once. Doesn't matter, do whatever works for you. And it's not going to be very difficult because that large row we knitted made big stitches. So it's easy to get your yarn needle into them, it's easy to see them, and we'll just gather off the crown on these big stitches. But because of the nature of the gathering at the top of the hat, it's not going to be noticeable that the stitches are abnormally large. Stitch across the gathered top a couple of times and knot the yarn so it's really secure. Now we can use the rest of the yarn to seam the edges of the hat together. The right side in this case is the purl side. So when making the purl side the right side, I have the best success using the back stitch, pretty small back stitches, all the way down the edges, and then seam the 2 layers of hem separately. Where I ran into yarn tails, I knotted them together because I can hide them inside the hat brim, between the 2 layers of fabric. Be sure to pull the hem lengthwise and weave in all the yarn tails, of course. And there you go, a nice hat from Odds and Ends.